As one of the big dogs of the video game world, SNK has had a long-lasting history of not just financial issues but also classic arcade games. Shooters, platformers, beat-em-ups, and puzzle games are some of the genres they've jumped into, but despite these titles having fans all around the world, their experiences with the fighting game genre is truly what solidified their legend status. The most iconic of their extensive fighting game IPs has always been the King of Fighters, and I've made plenty of videos covering specific games in the series, so I do have some experience with these titles. There are countless iterations of this franchise that have been released for the past 3 decades, and with the launch of SNK's new title, Fatal Fury City of the Wolves, I wanted to go way back and figure out, well, how did we get here? How did it all get started? We're going way back to a time when freely selecting your team members, assist fighters, and online play hadn't even been thought of yet, leading us with the very first entry into the series. First released in 1994 for SNK's MVS arcade board, The King of Fighters 94 is a 3-on-3 crossover fighting game, and it's the catalyst for all of this. When compared to modern SNK fighting games, 94 has a staggering number of differences, but there are also some similarities too, so for this video, let's uncover the full story. From its initial development, future influence, and pretty much everything in between, let's dive headfirst into the world of The King of Fighters 94. By the way, I'm getting most of my information in this segment from the books The King of Fighters Perfect Reader and The King of Fighters The Ultimate History, so a big shout out goes to these two texts. The true origins of King of Fighters 94 harken back to 2 figures in the Japanese games industry who, at the time, were relatively unknown to the general public. In his time working on titles like Street Fighter, Mega Man, and the first Fatal Fury title, Takashi Nishiyama has earned the title of Industry Giant as he had worked on many popular studios throughout the 1980s. Nishiyama gathered enough experience to introduce Masanori Kuwahashi, who worked at fellow company Irem, into SNK. Kuwahashi was then signed onto Baseball Stars Professional, where he met Toyohisa Tanabe, the battle designer on KOF. As far as I can tell, these 3 built up rapport over time, and they drafted an idea for the brand new game they wanted to make. Originally, the game was dubbed Survivor, and it was to take the form of a side-scrolling beat-em-up set in the Fatal Fury and Art of Fighting universe. Robert Garcia and Terry Bogard were the first 2 characters slated to appear in this title, but due to unknown reasons, the project was scrapped not long into early development. However, the idea of merging these 2 titles into a shared brand new game was a concept that SNK thought was golden, and they decided to take another shot at it, but this time develop it as a fighting game. The 3-on-3 tag format was apparently a leftover from Survivor, and other SNK properties like Psycho Soldier and Ikari Warriors were added into the mix to make the title feel like a massive, studio-wide crossover. As a side note, I don't know about you, but I always thought the name The King of Fighters sounded very cool and confident and just really striking and stylish, and much to my surprise, it already existed. The King of Fighters was the subtitle of the very first Fatal Fury game, so SNK just kind of lifted it from there. Well done, guys. With a general idea, basic character roster, and talented developers all ready to go, SNK began production on their brand new game. When developing KOF 94, SNK wanted to target not only core fans of Art of Fighting and Fatal Fury, but also new fans who weren't already familiar with their previous work. To avoid the game's tone becoming too serious and just kind of grim, characters with wackier designs like Benimaru and Chang were included, but when it came to the potential brand new main character, someone a bit younger was desired. With a snazzy fashion sense and dedication to becoming stronger, Kyo Kusanagi was chosen to be the series' new lead, and alongside Rugal Bernstein, who was supposed to be the most evil fighting game boss character ever, a new story was about to unfold. As KOF 94 was SNK's attempt to merge pre-existing characters with new ones in a brand new title, they had to properly balance the roster to avoid player frustration, and a rule that developers operated under was to never remove attacks. If a character had a move in a previous fighting game that was deemed to be way too strong, it should be nerfed rather than cut out of the game entirely, but some characters were given more attention than others. As arguably the face of SNK, Terry Bogard received much care and detail when designing his gameplay, and his brother Andy experienced similar preferential treatment. The development team underwent many trial and error tests to ensure acceptable game balance, but the aforementioned KOF Ultimate History book reveals that Haidern was intentionally designed to be overpowered. I'm not sure why this was the case, but I find the idea of Tanabe walking into the office and saying, "Alright everyone, everything I told you in yesterday's meeting about balance, just forget all of it and make Haidern OP," to be hilarious. Anyway, the team format was included to help the title stand out in the crowded fighting game market, and I always thought that each team was supposed to appeal to different types of players. The old school fans can choose Team Italy, patriotic Americans can pick Team USA, people who love Tekken can choose Team South Korea, and the girl gamers can go for Team England. After other characters were added into the mix to form even more teams, SNK were ready to deploy location test cabinets for members of the public to play, but they very quickly ran into problems. As time went on, more and more people started to enjoy the game and show up to these location tests, but in the beginning, only 10 people showed up to the first one, according to SNK artist CAC Yamasaki. This isn't a large group to gather data from, and because of SNK's various financial issues, they struggled to effectively market the title both domestically and abroad. Internally, some of SNK's staff members didn't have faith in the game, and the aforementioned CAC Yamasaki revealed in an interview that the game's lead programmer didn't believe that the game would make much money. It must be stated though that Yamasaki himself had confidence in the title. Before we move on, let's go back to the characters for a little bit. During my research, I stumbled across a previously untranslated Japanese developer interview from the people who actually made the game and designed all the characters. As much as I would love to cover every single little character detail and tidbit I found during this interview, I simply can't due to time constraints. In the beginning of the development, we didn't think a lot about Terry Bogard, but then Fatal Fury Special was released, and Terry's badassness in that game made him really popular with our staff, and suddenly he became a character that we focused on and took the time to get right. Everyone on the staff worked really hard to ensure that we didn't damage his image from Fatal Fury. People have been waiting forever for us to bring back Athena, so you can imagine the pressure we felt making her. We spent so much time and energy on her that the other developers started to criticize us for our Athena favoritism. We often hear complaints from fans who wanted her to have her original sailor suit uniform. The reason we didn't use that outfit is because of our concerns for the overseas market, and we thought it might look like we were pandering too hard with the fan service. From the start, our idea for KOF 94 was that it would be an ensemble cast of popular SNK characters, so we knew that any new characters we created would have to rival them in style. We put a lot of time into designing Kyo. In fact, we spent so much time on his design that his personality and character remained a mystery until the final stages of the development. Even the name Kyo Kusanagi wasn't decided till the end. Do people know how difficult he was to make? By the way, he was originally called Sho Kirishima. Despite initial doubts and trepidation surrounding the game's potential return on investment, The King of Fighters 94 proudly released in August of 1994. How was it received? Did people like the game? That's something we'll get into later, so for now, let's analyze KOF 94's gameplay systems. Taking inspiration from pre-existing entries in the Fatal Fury series, The King of Fighters 94 has 4 attack buttons. There are 2 punches and 2 kicks, and when combined with motion inputs, these are used to perform normal and special moves. But before we get into those, it's important to cover the universal system mechanics. Unlike some of its contemporaries, KOF 94 is loaded with unique ways for players to interact with each other, and while some of these like dashing and super jumping are quite simple, other mechanics are a lot more thought-provoking. Pressing both lights in neutral leads to a spot dodge, and with the exception of throws, this makes you fully invincible to every type of attack. Dodges also have no recovery, so you can immediately act out of them, making this technique very useful for when you are low health and can't take any more chip damage. The next mechanic charges your meter, and this is performed by holding the A, B, and C buttons. Like dodges, charging also has no recovery, so use this when it's safe to do so to get the upper hand. Providing players with a method of manually increasing their meter in neutral is something I've always loved about old SNK games like this, as it's very fun to have another way to generate resources on your terms. When the bar is full, you can also rip out a desperation move, KOF 94's name for a super. This will eliminate all of your meter, so it's important to time these carefully, and they can do really big damage under the right circumstances. If you're low on health and have no meter but you still want to use a super, fear not, because there's a comeback mechanic in place. When your health bar is flashing like this, the game will let you do these supers for free, so go wild. Seriously, you can do these as many times as you want with no penalty if you're on low health, and if you pick your spots carefully, it can be really challenging for a less experienced opponent to overcome this. To make the deal even sweeter, if you have low health and full meter at the same time, your desperation move becomes a super desperation move, dealing more damage than if you used it normally. All of this leads me to believe that the developers wanted to give losing players a fighting chance without outright buffing them. I'd be lying if I said that infinite supers weren't awesome, but it's not like your character gets a passive damage buff, health regeneration, faster movement, etc. In addition to this, maxing out your meter automatically puts you into max mode, an install that has a bunch of benefits. You do more damage, push enemies further back to make moves safe, and you have access to as many guard cancels as you want. It's not perfect however, as you take more damage and you can't charge meter to keep max mode active, but it's still a good install to have activated. There are even more mechanics like defensive attacks, charge cancelling, special move morphing, etc., but I simply don't have the time to explain them all in detail. Regarding KOF 94's mechanics generally, there's a lot to learn here, and I found myself surprised that a game as old and kind of rigid as this had so many universal options. It's quite obvious that everything the developers learned from the older Fatal Fury games was applied here, and as a result, the fighting mechanics are really feature-rich. But these are just mechanics, so let's spend some time getting to know who exactly is in the game. There are 8 teams with 3 characters each, resulting in 24 playable characters. One of my favorite qualities of fighting games is how diverse and unique the character rosters can be, and KOF 94 knocks this out of the park. Every character has their own fighting style that appeals to different kinds of players, and it means that it's not hard to find someone that you like to play as. Every fighter approaches battles differently, and while some of them are much stronger than others, I thought that they were all really fun to play, even though I wouldn't choose to main a few of them. From big and flashy attacks like special and super moves to smaller attacks that can be used to control neutral, I had a blast experimenting with every character's toolkit and figuring out which space they can occupy most effectively. An underrated aspect of the team system I realized while playing involves the amount of time people could spend playing in a single session. If you lose twice in a game like Street Fighter for example, you have to put in more money to keep playing, but with KOF 94, you pretty much get 3 chances to win. But it's not all sunshine and rainbows, because the only thing holding this roster back are the pre-selected teams. Due to this system, it's impossible to pick and choose which character you'd like to play as. Do you want to play as the Hungry Wolf and experience Terry Bogard's broken English? Then I hope you like playing as Andy and Joe, because you can't have your cake and eat it too. I'm not sure if this was due to hardware limitations or maybe the developers just hadn't thought of letting players create their own team yet, but whatever the case, this is the biggest drawback of the title in my opinion. If I had to create my own team, I'd probably go with Terry, Robert, and Goro, but this team in KOF 94 can only exist in my heart. Despite certain characters having access to Touch of Death combos and infinites, I can tell that the balanced team tried their best to make KOF 94 an enjoyable game for players of all skill levels, and although not every gameplay aspect has aged well, it's fun to go back and experience what the King of Fighters was like in the very beginning. Okay, now let's go back to KOF 94's reception. Before we begin, there are some things I have to make clear. Because of how old this game is, finding credible resources that report on sales figures and review scores is quite challenging, but I've done my best. Also, most review outlets specifically analyze the Neo Geo CD port of the title, and even though I'm pretty sure it's mostly the same thing as the arcade game, I'll be referring to this conversion when appropriate. Finally, many sources on the game's Wikipedia page are credible, but due to how obscure they are, I was unable to find some of them for myself, so take these with a grain of salt. Beginning in its native Japan, outlet Game Machine reported in their October 1994 issue that the King of Fighters 94 was the second most popular arcade game at the time. However, I couldn't find the issue online to verify this for myself, so we'll have to take Wikipedia's word for it. Other than that, Famitsu supposedly scored the Neo Geo version a 26 out of 40 in one of their magazine issues, but all I could find on the internet was the magazine's front cover that features a woman who I'm pretty sure would demolish me at any fighting game. Moving over to the West now, it's thankfully much easier to analyze resources from here. On page 11 of their November 1994 issue, American outlet Playmeter reported that KOF 94 was the 32nd most popular arcade game in the USA, spending only 1 month in the top 10. This doesn't sound too great, but at least KOF had the chance to be best friends with NBA Jam. Despite the title's sales not being amazing, for lack of a better term, it fortunately reviewed well, indicating to us in the present day that KOF 94 was somewhat of a sleeper hit back on launch. Remember the 3-strike system I mentioned before? Well, much to my delight, Next Generation magazine also commended this quality of the title, meaning that I wasn't reading into things too much. On the other hand though, not being able to customize your team was heavily panned, and even today, these criticisms still ring true. I can imagine that a vast majority of players, especially those familiar with SNK's previous work, would have loved to have freely selected their 3 favorite characters and just go at it, so not being able to do this with their friends would have stung. When analyzing the new characters, GamePro claimed that they weren't fans, calling them goofy and underpowered, and with how many OG SNK characters are considered to be top tier in 94, I think they may have been kind of onto something. After reading through reviews from outlets across America and the UK and using the Wayback Machine, I found that KOF 94's Neo Geo port received a dwindling reception over time. In 2010, the website reported an 8.5 out of 10, but in its last instance I could find, December 9th, 2019, it displays a 79.20% score. Going back to the 90s now, Edge magazine even scored the game an 8, and they're known for being very harsh with their reviews. KOF 94's dense battle system and roster involving a giant SNK crossover were universally loved the world over by both casual and die-hard fans, and Electronic Gaming Monthly even awarded the title with their Best Fighting Game award. Mai even won an award for being attractive, with the author lamenting how she isn't real. Battle cries of "Me Bouncy" echoed throughout the office. Oh man, 90s game magazines, they were something else, dude. Japanese outlet Gamist even awarded KOF 94 with the titles of Best Competitive Fighting Game and Best Direction, and they also praised the game's visuals, audio, and character roster. There are plenty of retrospective articles and reviews concerning the game, and they have nothing but high praise. It's not hard to find game publications positively comparing KOF to Street Fighter or claiming that the character roster was awesome, and I'm glad that the game is viewed in a positive light even after all these years. In 2011, Complex listed 94 as the 8th best fighting game of all time, and 1UP.com has a fantastic, albeit very short write-up about the game if you're interested. Normally, we'd end here and just kind of move on to the outro, but as this game essentially gave birth to a beloved fighting game franchise, I want to focus on the long-lasting legacy of KOF 94 for a little bit, as I feel that if I didn't, it would be a major missed opportunity. Ever since KOF 94 set the fighting game world on fire when it was released, there has been a seemingly infinite amount of KOF media. Sequels, spin-offs, remakes, and even novels are but a few of the various forms of entertainment that the King of Fighters series has delved into, so 94's legacy is simply undeniable. The first major continuation of the franchise was the King of Fighters 95, and this was pretty much a better version of 94. With brand new characters and the ability to freely select your team, woohoo! KOF 95 was a definite improvement over its older brother, and the series just kept going from there. A very unique entry into the series is KOF 94 Rebout, a full remake of the original 94. Released in Japan as a PS2 exclusive in 2004, Rebout aims to maintain the core gameplay of 94 while also adding in quality of life features. For starters, you can now freely choose your team. This feature was long overdue, and it's awesome that an official version of KOF 94 where I can play as Terry and Mai on the same team exists. There are also brand new stages that are rendered in 3D, and in addition to the upscaled and smooth character sprites, they look a little bit off. I understand that SNK had to try and alter the graphics a little bit to make the game feel new and fresh, but I don't think this worked out amazingly well. If I'm being honest, Rebound's reception wasn't great, and I don't think anyone plays it anymore despite having native online play and new features. Hell, the game's Western release was even cancelled due to various issues despite SNK sending out review copies to game publications. Other versions of the title exist on the PS2, PSP, and Wii via the SNK Arcade Classics Volume 1 compilation game, and you can also purchase 94 digitally on various storefronts for pretty cheap. Moving back to the original arcade KOF 94, a lot of its DNA is still felt in the series today, all these years later. Most characters from the title and the 3-on-3 format still make appearances in KOF's most recent entries, and despite 94 being the most limited of the old-school KOF games, it's only because its sequels kept expanding with grander and more ambitious ideas. Nothing that came afterwards could have happened without 94 being the way that it was, so despite the game's flaws, I view it as a resounding success. If the King of Fighters is a house, then 94 would be its humble and stable foundations. It's old as hell, and most people today weren't around when it was freshly installed, but it's still going strong behind the scenes when supporting everything that came after it. I'm not sure if SNK knew just how popular their game, and their entire series, if we're looking at things holistically, would become, and it's fantastic how KOF didn't fade away into obscurity like some of their other fighting game franchises. Terry, Andy, Joe, Mai, Athena, etc. all kept growing in popularity, and they're all fully playable in the King of Fighters 15, and that's not even mentioning 94's newcomers like Kyo and Benimaru. You would be hard-pressed to find a KOF game that doesn't include at least one of these guys as playable fighters, and it's for a good reason. Their visual designs, personalities, fighting styles, and storylines all captivated fighting game fans around the world, and they just kept getting cooler as the series progressed. Overall, a lot of what we take for granted now in the King of Fighters had their origins in 94, and I would be lying if I said it wasn't a lot of fun going back and figuring it all out. While it may be a little bit jank by today's standards, the King of Fighters 94 was an excellent starting point for the series, and I'm glad that I got to dive into it. Some of the most popular SNK characters either show up or first appeared in this title, and I loved interacting with them within the confines of 94's system mechanics. It might not have crazy max mode combos with level 3 supers or the later game's assist fighters, but the core gameplay loop introduced in 94 is indisputable, and there's a reason that the series is still going strong today. When writing this outro, I was reminded of the quote we heard earlier about the game's lead programmer not believing in the title, and although he was correct in the short term due to the game's initial lackluster sales, nothing could have prepared SNK for the success they would achieve in the long run. Nowadays, you can easily play 94 with rollback netcode on Fightcade, and due to the series' overwhelming popularity in various regions, there are a handful of players in the lobby still going at it. 94 is nowhere near as popular as KOF 98 or 2002, but I highly recommend checking it out if you're interested. The whole reason I made this video was because a friend of mine decided to finish 94 with every team and recount his experiences to me, so spreading the word with some friends is a good way of getting some old school KOF going. If you made it all the way to the end of the video, thank you very, very much for watching. I appreciate your time and I hope you had a lot of fun. Take care and I'll see you in the next one.